Tonight, I am excited to actually talk about something that I think I've maybe touched on once or twice over the show. We've been going live every day for around 200 days, and we have talked about so many things, had amazing conversations with wonderful guests. We've been doing two different podcasts. We've been doing the Knowing Show and the Craft and Calling. I just started going through A Course in Miracles every day starting January 1st, going twice live every day. And so this conversation tonight that I want to talk about is why we need to know what we want, because so many times when I'm talking with folks, regardless of age, I hear a lot of regret. I hear so much regret in their voice. And for those who don't have regret, I'm like, tell me your secret. Tell me how you have a wonderful marriage. And I actually love asking people that question, what's your secret? Because everyone loves to give advice. And so everyone has their own little secret sauce for why their relationship is working. And I really want to learn. I want to learn, and I want to live a life where I don't have regrets. And there's a difference between having regrets versus living a life where we fail and we learn and we get back up and we keep moving forward. I was actually I was with my client this weekend or this week, I guess. I was in St. Louis visiting one of our clients, and one of the vice presidents said, success is when you stand on a mountain of failures and continuing to effectively allow your failures to compound and climb upward. And I've never heard that concept, and I just loved it, because really, for me, oh my gosh, my natural state is to run away the second I smell a failure. I think of failure. I just capitulate and run away. When I was, I guess, in 11th grade, the SATs came in, like the SAT test to sign up for it came in, sign up for it. And I hid it from my parents, and I never took the SATs, which is crazy. And I just didn't want to. I was afraid of what would happen. And, when we think about this concept of knowing what we want, we actually need to face the person in the mirror of what happens if you don't get it. Because we actually need to confront the fear side, in addition to, okay, yes, what's the dream? What's the potential for the outcome that's so exciting and so wonderful? But what are we actually facing if we don't get it? And I actually think that knowing both of those, either one can be motivational. Like, we could be motivated by the fear of failure, or we could be motivated by the ideal and the dream. And from my experience, finding motivation from both, driving motivation of I don't want to live a life of regret, and as well as, and here's where I'm going and this is where I'm heading, both serve as bookends for the gap in between. Between stimulus and response is choice. In between that choice is also the fear of regret and the ideal for the potential and the ideal for the dream. In between that is choice. And allowing for both to serve as propelling forces to drive us onward. As we're striving for the ideal, let us not forget what lies behind. There's something actually around that's very biblical, of remembering what came before us, remembering what lies behind, and not forgetting that, and allowing gratitude to actually propel us forward. So it's not necessarily perhaps even fear of where we might end up or who we might become or what is the alternative of not getting what we want. Perhaps it's actually the gratitude for how far we've come, to look and live in the gain, and then also clearly aware of the gap. We need to be aware of both and allow us to effectively cultivate the tools and the skill sets to be able to leverage both the gap and the gain. I don't think it's one or the other, because when we know what we want and we know what our dreams are, we can actually effectively strive towards something. We now have bowling pins set in place. Otherwise, we're just bowling aimlessly and we're just fixated on, oh, look how far we came. So we need to have a clear picture of what we want, while also having a clear picture of, okay, well, what's going to happen if I don't get it? Where actually, what do those, when we think about having bumpers and guardrails up when we're bowling, what do the gutters of our lives actually look like? Like, if my ball was to actually miss the target and actually go into the gutter, what is that analogy for me? A couple of days ago, we talked about the allegories of our lives. What are those past stories and lessons that we can learn from and pull from and derive meaning and wisdom to then guide us forward, so that our values, and, oh, I love this. I've never thought of it this way. Our own allegories can serve as bumpers on the guardrails to guide us towards our goals. Our very own allegories. I think that that's one of the most beautiful ways to live, is being guided by our own lessons learned. And part of that, in order to live that way, is actually deriving meaning from the smallest little nuances and taking the allegory and the story and examining it and being curious about almost anything that happens. Taking stock of every day. What's the little lesson here for me? What are the wins? What are the areas to be grateful for? Where did I fail? Where did I miss the mark? And then what would it look like if I was to do it better and do it different? If we don't actually have clarity of what we would do instead, in lieu of our choice, then we're never going to be able to actually put something new in its place, in its stead. So then the next time something happens, we're just going to end up repeating history because we haven't taken the time to learn from the minuscule mistakes. And again, mistakes, they're all lessons. They're all opportunities to learn. And frankly, they're just part of being human. But if we're not taking the time to identify, oh man, I actually would do something different next time, then we're not able to then do something different in the future. So there's a reprogramming on a daily basis. I write every night, and God bless it, I've been doing it every night since January 1. So I'm hoping I can continue. But one of the things that I'm doing as a daily habit is writing down every night what I did that day. And I've got this 5-year journal where every year that day compounds on itself. So it's 365 pages. And then a blank space where I write the year in it. So next year, 2027, will be the 5th year that I've written this journal. I'm thinking of creating an app where it's an endless journal and you can just look back over the years. It's kind of like Facebook, but it allows for you to see all of the years compounding on itself of actually what you did and how you lived your life that day. And just small little memories. It doesn't need to be long. But in that process of just taking a moment to remember, it's like honoring the day. This morning, I slept over at my dad's last night because this morning we had a 6:30 a.m. meeting an hour away with a restoration firm. We were bringing them coffee and breakfast and presenting to them about our family's 100-year-old business. And it was just the sweetest thing. I woke up at 4:30 and he was already awake. And I gave him a hug and he was like, "Welcome to January 15th. Happy Thursday." And it just was the most precious thing. And I was like, man, I am so your daughter. Because I wake up and I'm like, we only have this one day, good morning world. Just this is the one day. This is so precious. This is so special. And we have the opportunity to really honor it if we should so choose. That's totally a tongue twister. But it's our choice. But so much of that choice comes from the ability to be present in this moment. And so having those little hallmarks throughout our day to get centered, to get quiet, to come into, I call it vertical alignment, bringing our beliefs, mindsets, behaviors, all of that. It's all of these things are disparate. And then we bring them all into alignment under the hierarchy with our ideal at the head, under the superordinate principle of who we were created to be in the first place. And then that's the natural order. But we have to take the time every morning. It's a pause and moment in time to bring everything into alignment. And then in the evening, it's okay, let me bring everything back into alignment. What are the lessons learned? So many moments to be grateful for. How am I feeling? How am I doing? Because so much of the recognition of that before we go to bed, our subconscious heals for us. It's really wild what our nervous system can do. So long as we actually take the time to be aware, then it allows for, it effectively activates our soul, and our soul can go on its journey. And a lot of times that's our dreams, working through the pain of the subconscious. And it's really moving through that in a powerful way. So in order for us to live with intention, to even know, well, what do I want in the first place? Having these pockets of time, having these spaces dedicated that are hallmarks and frankly sacred, that you and I hold. They don't need to be sacred to anybody else. And so in those moments, that's when and where we come to find out what we want. And the reason why we need to know what we want is because we will inevitably end up living someone else's life. We'll end up living with regrets. We'll end up living solely focused on the past and not able to live and create something new and just repeat history. Another reason for that and this kind of falls in line with, not having regrets, but making the most, like truly, truly making the most, writing our own story. Like that's the thing that's so exciting, is that we don't realize, my glasses are dirty. We don't realize how we really are the authors of our own story. I did not realize that even after I started the process of knowing myself and emotional intelligence and like starting to be like, what the heck does all of this mean? I have no idea. As I started that process, it was only this year or 2025, I think, that I really realized how much, put my glasses on wrong, how much power I have in writing my own story. I was actually driving towards my condo last summer, and I just had this thought. I was like, if I was the author of my life, I would 100% make it a good story. I would add in the twists and turns. I would add in the heartbreak. I would add in the lost moments. I would add in the lessons. I would add in the heightened moments too. I would have a good story be filled with all these beautiful moments. And otherwise it's boring. If it's all up here or all down here, it's just, who wants to listen and read and watch that story? And so really every good author knows that there's going to be highs and lows, because that's the arc. And so with that, if I was to be the author of my life, what would I actually entail? I would actually entail some hard times so that I could learn the lesson. I would also learn from the moments that aren't so hard if I was to actually be the author of my life. So to actually put ourselves in the writer's chair, in my book Knowing, I actually draw on the movie A Christmas Carol. And what is the author's or the actor's name? Dan somebody. I think it's Dan. I'm pulling up my chat. Can someone help me? Hi, Adarsh. Good to see you. Waffle Fries. Kev Johnson. Brian C. Can someone help me? What was it? Dan? Is that his name? Dan? It doesn't sound right. The gentleman who was in the movie The Christmas Carol about the Charles Dickens. He plays Charles Dickens, and it's the process of writing The Christmas Carol. And it's so fun. It's such a fun film, because as he's writing this story, he's effectively writing from his own experience. And the characters, once he comes upon them, once he actually sees them in his mind's eye, they come alive. He sees them in front of him, and then they're part of the movie. And each one that comes forth actually represents an element from his past that he has yet to reckon with. And only after he has reckoned with it is he then in control of it. So there's these characters in our mind's eye, in our experience, that frankly really come in and hold a power over us until we have done the work to reconcile. Stevens. Hold on. I'm going to Google this. Christmas Carol movie. Oh no. I think it's a Dan Stevens. Dan Stevens. That's what it is. I think that's what it is. The man who invented, Dan Stevens starred as the author. There we go. Dan Stevens. I was right. Dan Stevens was the star in this film. It was in 2017. And y'all, that movie so depicts what happens in our own minds. Once we start getting more clear on what we want, we can actually bring those voices in our head into submission, into this posture of subservience to a higher ideal, into a future goal. Because once we start hearing those voices and we know, man, if I was to actually listen to that voice and follow the yellow brick road, I know I'm going to end up over here. So I actually need to pull that voice in, harness it, and take it under my power and under my control. And then I'm going to rewrite it and refocus it. There's a phrase that says, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So once we know what we want, then we can leverage all of that attention and refocus it and point it elsewhere. But we have to take the time to know what it is in the first place. And we also have to take the time to know, what are our patterns of behavior? Where do I naturally have a bent? Where do I get out of alignment? Where do I kind of falter and get off that 180 trajectory? Okay, I'm slightly degrees off. Well, if I keep going, I'm going to go massively out of alignment here. So where do I deviate? How do I come back? And where am I going? And again, we know what we want for the purpose of living a life that we're proud of, building a legacy, because our legacy is built one moment at a time, every single moment. So with that, thank you all so much for joining me tonight on the Knowing Show. I will be on, I think, normal time tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Eastern for A Course in Miracles. We're going to be going through lesson 16. It's the 16th day of the year. Brian, energy flows where attention goes. I just, honestly, that's so powerful. I had never heard that until August this year. I was at a Joe Dispenza event. Say what you will. And I loved it. It was so impactful for me, so impactful. And that concept actually has saved me many times in moments where I'm like, oh yeah, I can actually just choose to focus my attention elsewhere. And I don't need to feel this way. I have complete control over my thoughts, over my feelings. All of a sudden, we're the authors of our lives. But we need to know some of those basic things. What do we want? What does it look like when we get off course? And how do we get back on course? So with that, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I will see you tomorrow for A Course in Miracles at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Bye.